What kind of interaction does Cher throw at you last minute when you're on stage? Like, cause I'd love to know that. Like, you're in front of a crowd, you're about to cross paths. What does she do?
Oh, well, if you're cross paths, sometimes she wanted to do the back to back, or she'd sometimes rest her arm on my shoulder or whatever and sing, and so things like that you just kind of have to be ready for if she's going to do it, and be like, okay, and not look like a deer in headlights. And kind of look like you're, but at the same time, don't become known as the guy who knocked over Cher accidentally on stage. You'd be on TMZ later that night or whatever.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of 2020. My name is Cory here. As always, I'm back again, the full trio, with Siobhán Cronin and Benny Goodman. It's good to have you back, Ben. We missed you the last couple weeks in the intros.
I've been hobbling up and down the stairs. In fact,
Ben, you want to fill in our guests on what happened to you?
Well, first off, my leg filled up like a balloon, so I couldn't actually, like, in my knee. So we're in the middle of talking to Chris Caffrey from Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and my fiance Cindy, who's a nurse. I had to, like, you guys might have seen me if you actually watch the YouTube, like the 7 of you. I like leave in the middle. That's basically me going upstairs, having a conversation with Cindy and having her go like, oh yeah, no, you need to have that drained. Like, oh wow, that's a lot of fluid. So I couldn't walk. And then I go to the doctor and they go, what's wrong with you? And I show them the video that Cory's going to play of my dog mutilating me. But then they realize it's actually not my knee that gets hurt, it's my back. And that's when I went to my DO just a day ago, which is a doctor of osteopathy, and basically said, this is why my disc is still extra herniated. So I'm basically like the equivalent of Keith Richards right now, except less healthy.
Well, it's good to have you back.
We're glad to have you back this week. And before we get too off the rails, I'll just introduce our guest for this week, Joel Hoekstra from Trans-Siberian Orchestra, Whitesnake, many other projects.
Busy guy. Busy guy.
Busy guy.
Works really hard.
Works really hard. We got only one episode with him, but we were grateful to get him on.
He was busy doing a lesson afterwards. He had like 7. When we told him, we're like, hey man, we might do 2 lessons. He was just like, I have so many things that I need to do before I go to bed tonight.
Well, meanwhile, I'm exhausted every moment that I'm not doing something on tour, and he's talking about how he doesn't remember a day that he hasn't been productive on his off time on tour. I will say it was pretty amazing to hear that level of energy. Somebody that just seems to have an endless reserve of it.
Yeah, if you want to reinforce the idea of hard work and how that can lead to success, this would be the episode. But so it's limited. We've got about 45 minutes. But a lot of information we tried to cram in there, and we want to do just a real quick update from our sponsor, Lost Symphony, and that is that we are working on new music, believe it or not. For anyone that is involved, or, checks out this podcast that has no idea, we are in a band.
That's how we know each other.
That's how this whole thing has come together. And believe it or not, we're actually working on new music. It's been a little bit. But we're pretty excited about it.
For those that don't know Lost Symphony, we are in a symphonic metal project. I wouldn't even say it's totally metal, like kind of like an epic, like instrumental thing. But, we kind of play it down for a band that has, we had Marty Friedman play with us on a bunch of songs, Jeff Loomis. We've had Ollie from All That Remains before he passed away. This is one of the last projects he did, like, cheers to the heavens to our brother Ollie. Nuno Betancourt. Like, listen, I got, and I'll take credit for this, Nuno Betancourt, Alex Skolnick, Richard Shaw, and Marty Friedman all to play on a song together. And despite it being triumphant, the hardest thing was to get all those pandas in the cage. So if you want to know what's going on with Lost Symphony, we got even more pandas in the cage this time, because you may have seen them on our episodes.
You calling my friends pandas?
They're the best. They're so cute and adorable. Like, come on, Mariko. She's a panda. You don't think so?
I agree that she is cute and adorable. We can ask her if she likes being compared to a panda. But yeah, to continue your thought, we did get...
She's like a rabbit.
Our friends, Mariko and Zuzana, who have also been my bandmates in Starset, Z currently is, to record on a new song that we are working on. So, Ben, you can continue with what you were saying.
Along with an absolute incredibly insane... So, like, anyone that's read about Lost Symphony, we were just in Guitar World magazine. It actually happened in April this month. Slash is on the cover. I'm in the magazine with Marty Friedman and Nuno, so like it's real. One of the things that we said about finding Kelly, our guitarist in our band, was the fact that he was the greatest guitar player that no one had ever heard of. And Hector Hellion, if you haven't seen this guy, go onto YouTube and type in Hector Hellion, Hellion. Dare I say I found another Jedi. And the irony is that one of the guy, our buddy Scott, who's behind a lot of this, one of his friends was trying to troll us by saying, oh, if you guys want to be really good, you should get this guy on bass, and sent a video of Hector Hellion. And we were already talking to him.
Gold star for you, Ben. You are definitely the Jedi of getting Jedi musicians. So you definitely win the award for that one. You have managed to get all of us together, and it is very exciting to have this new song to work on.
Yeah, and then we'll be dropping some hints about it and some behind the scenes footage and some updates as it gets closer to release. But we just wanted to kind of let people know that Lost Symphony is still a thing. We're still doing things, doing some pretty cool things, and you definitely want to stay tuned.
But I want to also mention that the artwork is done by a guy named Boris Groh. And so if you've gone and you've seen anything from Lost Symphony, if you go onto lostsymphony.com and look at any of the unbelievable artwork, and I don't say that because I drew it. I say it because I found the guy because I thought he was freaking unbelievable. A guy named Boris Groh, and he's from Ukraine. And he actually drew a picture of a dude giving the middle finger to a boat that got bombed the very next day, and he's now the official stamp of the entire country of Ukraine during this terrible war. So we want to send our love to our friend Boris Groh and the artists behind, including this new single that you'll be able to get a signed poster with when it comes out. For every song we've ever done, the visual component is our Ukrainian friend Boris Groh, who is now, as you can see, Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, holding up this stamp, this picture. It's now become almost like the face of fuck you, Russia, from our friend Boris Groh on the stamp for Ukraine. So,
yeah,
you kick ass, Boris.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. We're going to have more for you, in the coming weeks and months. But right now, I think we should get into our episode.
So here we are,
Joel,
part one.
Well, but hold on. With Joel Hoekstra from Whitesnake, from Trans-Siberian Orchestra.
Ben, you might have missed the part where I introduced him already.
From Rock of Ages.
Ben missed the part
Cher.
that I'm a co-host on this episode.
He was on Broadway for years. He's taught 70 students a week since the dawn of time.
Okay.
I'm tired
Let's roll
of talking about it.
Is my internet working?
Yep. Subscribe.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of 2020. I'm Siobhán Cronin here, as always, with my cohorts Benny Goodman and Cory Peza. And this week we have a very, very special guest, probably the busiest guitar player in the country, in the world. I don't know, you're everywhere. But this is Joel Hoekstra of Trans-Siberian Orchestra, Whitesnake, many other projects. He has a lot to teach us about guitar playing.
I liked him in Night Ranger. I thought you kicked ass in Night Ranger.
Yeah. But I follow you. I met you playing in the string section in Trans-Siberian Orchestra many years ago, and I followed you since on Facebook, Instagram, all that. And you're all over the place doing amazing things, so I'm excited to hear what you have to say about your work and your career and guitar playing and all the above.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
My first question is, so when I saw you with Whitesnake, I saw John Sykes back in the day. He's this big, tall guy with crazy hair that fucking murders it. Then there's this guy, Doug Aldrich, big, tall guy with crazy hair. And then you walked on stage. I'm like, oh, who's this guy? And then you fucking blew my mind with Whitesnake. Does David Coverdale have one of those things where it says you must be this tall to play in my band?
No, not at all. I mean, thanks go to Adrian Vandenberg for paving the way for really tall Dutch guys to be in the band, for sure.
The one guy I didn't say that was tall and it's from the same place as you.
Yeah, I think I owe it all to Adrian. Like I said, Adrian's taller than I am. I mean, I'm 6'3". I think Adrian's maybe 6'5". Yeah, he made it easy. Coming in at 6'3" was no big deal. It was like, all right, the guy's 6'3", that's fine.
I mean, Whitesnake is such a holy band for so many people. What's it like to learn such great guitar players' solos and be able to represent that, but also be a huge integral part of that history?
Oh, I mean, for me, I keep it all in perspective and realize that, it's a total honor to be a small part of the history of the band. I mean, like you said, the history of guitar players that have been through there, amazing catalog of songs to play, some really iconic rock names still in the band, and David Coverdale, obviously, and Tommy Aldridge and Red Beach, and to get to work with all those guys is an honor for me. And I just take a real workman-like approach to it and show up and do the best I can with everything, and try and keep it in perspective in terms of what the fans want, and just try to do the best job possible, man.
Yeah,
that's
real quick. So what we generally do is the first kind of step in the podcast is just kind of get a little backstory about how you got into music. I know that your parents were classical musicians. I read a little bit, and you played cello and piano growing up. So kind of like a relative Cliff Note version of your journey into music, and then kind of what was the first time that you thought that might actually become a career?
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, the classical musicians for parents, and so music around the whole time. And when you hear that I played cello and piano at a young age, don't picture anything good.
Well, the exposure counts.
I wasn't amazing by any stretch of the imagination. I just wasn't that into it until I heard rock. I heard AC/DC when I was 11, and that got me really into it. Back in Black, in particular. And made me want to get a guitar, and that is really, I mean, it just kind of was like something that I was so into that I like to say in a way that's the last real career decision I ever made, was when I was 11 to play guitar, because I just kind of did it and went, well, I guess I'm just going to keep doing this and see what happens. And that's always been the mindset. And there were probably some things that maybe I look back and go, gosh, those were probably dark and tough times that I went through, but it didn't seem to bother me much. I just kind of kept going and just tried to stay busy and work at it. And I always felt grateful to be able to make a living with the guitar over needing to give up my dream. I watched a lot of my friends, we all started out with that dream and watched them kind of go into other things. And it took a long time for things to open up for me, but eventually they did, and I'm grateful for it. I think in the end that makes you more grateful when things do work out, rather than somebody who gets it handed to them at a really young age and
Right.
kind of take it for granted when you're older or whatever. So I mean, for me, I feel like really lucky to have all the opportunities I get. I don't look at it like, well, of course I deserve them. I feel like there's a lot of great players out there, man. I'm not oblivious to that. So I think the opportunity to have a career, and you owe it to the music community to be thankful for that in today's music business and climate. So I mean, my story's a long one, dude. If I broke it down by
right, I know it's
every
hard
gig I've been through, you'd be like, geez, you guys would all be asleep by the time I was done. But
no, but it's interesting. I mean, I'd be curious to hear, not to cut you off, but kind of the first instance of you being a professional guitarist, or what was the step between starting to play on guitar and actually joining a band or getting out into the professional world? Like, how did it sort of kick off for you?
I mean, my first band was teenage years, high school. Having a band that we had our own songs, we played covers, and definitely did a couple years of studying classical guitar in college as well, and went to GIT. And I was working a lot on my guitar playing. I didn't really have anything as far as professionalism or like any kind of business model together as far as what was going to happen. I did a lot of teaching in my 20s, and then kind of supplemented that with gigs. So to give my career time to build, I used to have 70 students a week basically throughout my whole 20s, and teach and then just take off whenever I had gigs. And that kind of took the pressure off of that whole I need a band to that's a hard road to go, and it also kept me out of that land of having a day job and going like, I'm only doing this to help my music career. Teaching was big for me because it allowed me to have my guitar in my hands 6-7 hours a day every day, and give my career time to develop. And
that's a job. That's a job.
Kind of like making my way through the local Chicago scene, and that's a really long story. I mean, playing with Kathy Richardson's band there was a nice step up. She was doing really well locally and put me in with Jim Peterick and playing in his house band. And Kathy got the role as Janis Joplin in a show called Love Janis, and when that went to New York, I became the guitarist in the band for that show. And that's the first time that I gave up teaching. And that was kind of right when I turned 30. And so that was when it really began, of like that whole like, oh, I'm not teaching anymore. I'm like just a performer. And so that was a big step. And then that Jim Peterick seed that was planted from me being in his band and his house band really kind of gave me my opportunity with Night Ranger, because he would have guests come and sing their hits. And one of them that was there every year was Kelly Kagi, the drummer from Night Ranger. And so when they needed somebody to fill in on a show, I became the guy to do that, and they liked me and gave me an opportunity to join the band. And this is, even the Reader's Digest version is super long. Sorry.
No, it's great.
I did Love Janis, and then when that closed, I had one of my subs played in the Turtles, like, Happy Together. And because the show Love Janis was Janis Joplin's guitarist Sam Andrew from Big Brother and the Holding Company, I started to do gigs with them. So doing gigs with Turtles, Big Brother and the Holding Company. The director of Love Janis put me in another show called It Ain't Nothing But the Blues. That was a blues show that I went on the road with. And all these things kind of just, I just put my best foot forward with everything that I did. And then, like I said, that Night Ranger thing kind of, through doing World Stage, started playing with Scrap Metal, which was the Nelson guys, the Nelson brothers, and Mark Slaughter and Kelly from Night Ranger. And that really, I think, solidified me being able to go into Night Ranger. They felt like, yeah, this guy will do a good job. Getting in there and doing that, and then through doing pit work in New York, subbing in playing Broadway musicals, like in the pits, getting Rock of Ages, and then that was like on stage, and kind of had a beautiful symmetry with Night Ranger, because I could take off whenever I played with them, and Night Ranger's song was in the show, so it was this kind of cool period that developed. And then a couple years into that, getting the opportunity to audition for Trans-Siberian and getting that gig, and that was difficult because that was the first time I was going to have to take off of both Rock of Ages and actually Night Ranger for 2 months. But those guys were cool and allowed me to do that. And then it just kind of led to the opportunity eventually of auditioning for Whitesnake. And that kind of replaced Night Ranger more or less. So it became kind of Whitesnake. Rock of Ages closed, so that went away. Whitesnake and TSO kind of became the thing. And then when David needed to take a year off of touring to have knee surgery, I just kind of put feelers out for the opportunities to fill in, and that led to Cher. And that's kind of the Reader's Digest version of how all this stuff came together.
Bring me through this as a live performer, going from a Broadway show to playing with someone like Cher to playing with someone like Whitesnake. And we've obviously heard on the show, we've spoken to some of the people in TSO. It's like its own thing. Like, where do you see the distinct differences as a performer being a part of all those different cogs in the musical works?
I mean, I think every gig is different and needs to be treated as such. Certain elements are similar and transfer over, but every gig there's a little bit of a learning curve to figure out what is going to make everybody happy. But I think in general, it always comes down to hard work and just being the person that puts in the most work on it and tries the hardest. And, all those experiences with the Turtles and Big Brother and the Holding Company were valuable for me, because that made me have to be somebody that was valuable to the gig beyond like, oh, he's got great chops, So it's at that point, the Turtles had very little to do with like shredding or anything like that. It was more or less like singing background vocals, being on time, being somebody that everybody liked having around. So all the gigs have good life lessons to learn. And I'm not perfect by any means, it's always a learning process for all of us. But I think in general, you just try to outwork everybody and try to put your best foot forward and do the best you can.
Yeah, I can imagine too that having some of that classical and Broadway background is a huge leg up in the guitar world. I mean, I'm a violinist, so it's different for me, but we come from classical training for the most part. So it's all reading music and being able to sit in different situations. But I would imagine that probably set you apart for a lot of auditions, just having kind of that experience or those chops of being in those settings, you know?
I think with Trans-Siberian, it definitely helped that I was doing Broadway, and so I always like to say you could trace all these things back to things that made absolutely no monetary sense that a lot of people would have turned down. Like when I was subbing on Broadway, I would learn, my friend JJ was who I subbed for. He lives a couple blocks from me in New York, and he's like a legitimate pit musician. I'm not really a legitimate pit musician, but I would learn his book, whatever he was working on, and get it down, and it made absolutely no sense. I mean, I would spend like 6 hours a day for like a few weeks getting it together for the opportunity to maybe go in here and there and be totally stressed out. And, you know, I mean, not that a pit gig pays poorly, but by the time you look at the amount of hours you put in and then you get it one time and, you know, make a little bit of money, you go, gosh, I was probably making like 75 cents an hour or something, or
right.
if that. And, you know, same with the Peterick gig. That was a lot of work to do those, being in the house band. He would give us like 35 songs, and it would take me weeks, and I would to get prepared to fly in on no rehearsal and play those shows. And that was, if you consider that at that time I was doing 8 shows a week with Love Janis, it was dedication, you know, and again, something that you look at and go, gosh, that probably was like made no financial sense, but eventually that landed me in Night Ranger. So I think just being the person who's willing to put in the work until you're just absolutely can't work anymore.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I don't. Yeah. Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, that's what opens up the opportunity. Hard work will, you know, it's like that's an old adage, right? The harder you work, the luckier you get. So.
But I'm not sure everyone has that motivation. I'm curious, like, at what point in your life did you feel like this is what I really want to do? And I know you referenced it earlier, but I feel like that drive has to sort of come from somewhere. Was there an experience, you know, you mentioned hearing AC/DC and that inspired you, but was there a particular experience that made you say, all right, I'm going to go all in and like guitar is what I want to do, music is what I want to do? Because it really does take a lot of sacrifices, you know?
Yeah, we had a great local scene in Chicago and a lot of really talented musicians. I had some great teachers early on that were very influential. You know, my first teacher showed me all songs and got me so inspired about playing, like being able to play the music that I loved on guitar, and didn't turn it into like a, you know, you're going to learn how to read music and have no fun on this thing, kid, you know. So having that early on, and I had a great second teacher, TJ Helmrich, who's incredibly technically proficient and, you know, taught me all the tapping techniques that eventually really helped me with Night Ranger, be able to do all the 8-finger stuff. And, you know, that was lucky. And I grew up in a local band scene with, like, you know, Danny Donegan from Disturbed, you know, like, I mean, we had a great scene. There was a lot of great guys and a lot of talent, people that were inspiring to be around. We were all, I mean, the 80s, we were all trying to outdo each other back then, you know. It was like, it was a big question was how many hours a day are you practicing back then, you know, and that was a good environment. Some of it might have been a little bit backwards and not musical. We were all kind of learning to shred before we really understood a lot of musicality and understood a lot of what it is to be a pro. But in the end, it's still all good for you when you spend that amount of time with your guitar. And then one of the best things that happened was that scene kind of went away by the time I was old enough to do anything with it, and that set me off on that weird path that I'm telling you about of doing all this different stuff. And I feel like that did a number of things for me. It made me more well-rounded and maybe more of an actual musician than just like a, you know, quote-unquote shredder. And also made me more grateful, which we touched on earlier, because by the time things do start working out for you and you go, man, like, there were many times I figured this was not going to work out all that great and that I was just going to, but I was always kind of happy with that too. The main motivation for me was always to be able to do this for a living. And it was never really like to, you know, have a mansion or have, you know, sports cars or anything like that. It was like, I just want to be able to do this and not have to take another job, different, like,
yeah.
you know, that would have been That would have been the failure for me, not necessarily like, oh, this guy didn't sell a million albums, because I haven't. So, I mean, I missed that whole window of time when that was going on, and to be in a band like that. And I didn't have the business savvy about me enough to go like, oh, the 90s are in, let me completely change my image and try and get in a band that's doing that. And I mean, I was just interested in playing guitar. So I did all kinds of stuff. I mean, I was in like wedding bands, and I mean, I did all kinds of stuff that people would be like, really? Like, you did that? It's not the normal path of a lot of the 80s guitar heroes that achieved a lot of success when they were like 21. There's a lot of so different path, but it's all good, man. It all worked out, and like I said, I think in the end I appreciate it more in this moment to have the opportunities, and I don't feel as jaded as some.
Listening through, your Cliff Note version of your career, which is impressive as Cliff Notes. So I'm sure the long version you can probably write a pretty epic book about. But you're talking about a lot of opportunities and luck, which they say like the finding the opportunity and being prepared is the luck. Were there any transitions throughout your career, or any times where you were in one gig and maybe an opportunity was kind of showing its head and you weren't sure whether it was worth it to leave your current position? Or were there any difficult decisions where maybe just the timing didn't line up, where you thought like, oh, if only this was a week later, I could have jumped on that tour?
Oh, all of it. I mean, when you have multiple gigs, that's always that's a terrible situation in a way. It's great, it's a blessing, but it's this awful thing because you care so much about every opportunity you get. But when you're unavailable for something and you need to go do something else, it makes the people that are there think maybe he doesn't appreciate it. And it's like you actually do. You're just trying to have the opportunity to like keep going and do it year round, which is a hard thing to find. There's not many bands that are like, hey, we're going to work all 12 months this year. So as musicians, are you supposed to take 3 months off and just not do anything and that kind of, so it's always tricky. I'd say the one that stands out the most with that would be Trans-Siberian. I mean, it's funny now because I look at that like one of the greatest things that's come my way in my life. I mean, I'm still with it 12 years later. But at the time when I officially got offered the job, I was scared because I had Rock of Ages already. I was playing these 8 shows a week, and I was subbing out and playing with Night Ranger. And so this was like, hey, now you're going to have to take 2 months out of the year and tell each of them you're not available. And that was a difficult period. That was difficult to tell Night Ranger because I loved being there and loved, those guys gave me a huge break in letting me join their band. And Rock of Ages was a big break for me and really changed my life. It wasn't something that I necessarily dreamt about as a kid or saw coming, but it really did change my life. So it was a weird thing to take each of those and go, okay, I have to go do this now for 2 months. And eventually I just kind of thought, the more you have going on, the more stability you have. Like if in the back of my mind, it was like if Rock of Ages closes, or if for some reason Night Ranger decides we're not going to tour anymore, or somebody's health is compromised and the band can't tour anymore. I just always kept thinking you want to have as many things going as possible to have some stability. Does that make sense?
Sure. No, I can totally relate to that. I encounter that a lot in the classical world too, especially as like a hired gun violinist where, I'm a part of a million different projects. And of course you have to make choices like that. But I think an interesting thing about you though is, I mean, you have such an amazing on-stage personality and personality in your playing that I think to a certain degree probably comes down to people are going to value you being a part of them as well. You're not replaceable easily. So I think, being a part of a lot of things too, but I think whenever you're gone from something, that's missed. It's very hard to put someone else in your shoes.
I mean, I'm not delusional. I think everybody's replaceable. You can think that, but you're usually wrong.
Really?
to go there mentally. Everybody's replaceable. So it's for me. It's why I try to do the best I can all the time. That maybe even to some degree they'd say, yeah, kind of miss that about him, or, he used to do this, or at least set the bar as high as I can. But I think that's all you can do. But in the end, everybody's replaceable
sure,
in every gig. So
Well, let me ask you this, because you said when you originally started playing that it was AC/DC, that Angus Young, obviously a lot of people started Back in Black. Who do you consider to be some of the archetypical players, whether they're guitarists or even, for me, it was like Freddie Mercury made me want to get into music as much as Eddie Van Halen did. Who do you think really said, dude, this is for you? Because you said Angus Young, but I see you on stage and you have such, like Siobhán said, such a personality. Where does that come from?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about all that. Like the stage presence thing is probably maybe just like a personality, and it's a little bit different with each gig depending on what's called for. I think that the stage presence thing, I got a big kick in the butt from Brad Gillis and Jack Blades joining that band, because the way Night Ranger's set up with Kelly facing sideways and the keyboards on the other side. So those that haven't seen the Night Ranger stage setup, and then it was Brad stage left and Jack center and myself and stage right. And I think that I remember joining that band and going over to Japan pretty early on and going center stage with Brad for the harmony solos and stuff, and I was like holding my guitar a little higher back then and looking at my guitar a little more, making sure I played like super clean, and I'd look over and Brad was making eye contact with the audience and putting on a show, and everybody was looking at him, and I thought, okay, I can't go out like this and have it be like, I'm on stage and I look like the guy who has no stage presence. So those guys definitely helped me have... They're very lively on stage, both of those guys as performers. Brad and Jack are real fun to watch play, and so I think that was a big inspiration in terms of getting me moving on stage and trying to be more entertaining to watch. And then TSO is a little different. It's a real wide stage, the width of the arena, so usually you're kind of alone in your spot when you're around the front, and it's your job to kind of hold the audience's attention when you're in that spot. So that was the same to a degree, because you needed to be visually entertaining and kind of hold people's attention when you were there, but it wasn't as interactive. You weren't like going with the other bandmates in those moments. It's kind of more like, okay, it's your job when you're over on the left wing or whatever to entertain the crowd that's right there. You don't want to just go over there and stand there. And then Whitesnake is about that too, but we're a lot more about the vocals and David kind of moving about the stage, and then you have your moments where it's really about you. So every gig was a little bit different. And then Cher, we were on a bandstand in the background, not visible for the majority of the gig, and then I was the only band member to step out one time on my own during a wardrobe change of hers to kind of hold the crowd during a guitar bit, and then a couple times of stepping out just with her. And so, of course, every moment's different. Like when you're stepping out with her, then you're trying to figure out, all right, how do I mesh with her visually and make it work? So a lot of that came down to working the opposite side of the stage. If she was going to go stage left, then I would go stage right to balance the stage, so people on one side weren't bored, and then sometimes when we'd cross, she'd want to interact, and so you had to be kind of ready for whatever she would do with that. And so every gig has its own stage presence too. I think eventually you got to kind of...
What kind of interaction does Cher throw at you last minute when you're on stage? Like, because I'd love to know that. Like, you're in front of a crowd, you're about to cross paths. What does she do?
Oh, well, if you cross paths, sometimes she wanted to do the back to back, or she'd sometimes rest her arm on my shoulder or whatever and sing, and so things like that you just kind of have to be ready for if she's going to do it, and be like, okay, and not look like a deer in headlights, and kind of look like you're, but at the same time, don't become known as the guy who knocked over Cher accidentally on stage. You'd be on TMZ later that night or whatever. So, just things like that. Like, so, it wasn't anything like insane, but she really varied it up. Like, she would rarely do the same thing from night to night in those moments. So you kind of had to be ready for whatever she had in mind. And
in all of your projects, there's like kind of the two schools of thought, and we've talked to bands and artists that do it both ways. There's some artists that want every night to be, very planned, very calculated. There's not a lot of deviation. I imagine anything with a crazy, light show like some of your projects and all that is like that. And then there's bands that want to make sure that it stays fresh throughout the tour, and that there's like a spontaneity to the performance. Like what kind of shows do you prefer when you're up there performing?
Either way. David is a lot like Cher, where he rarely says the same thing between songs. He varies it up a lot. His raps, he'll do different things from show to show, and that's a lot of fun. It can keep it like interesting, and it doesn't feel like, oh, here we go, let's go through the motions of a show. So I think a mix, but you kind of want to know what to expect, obviously, to a degree. Not like, hey, let's play this song instead right now, oh, wait a minute, I haven't gone through that, or, so I think some kind of mixture of that is probably ideal.
Yeah, absolutely. Can we talk really quick, if we still have a minute? I'm curious to hear about your early experience with Trans-Siberian Orchestra, because that, to me, even as a string player on the side of the stage, was an amazing, amazing, life-changing moment just to like sort of experience that. And I'm curious, what was your perspective coming into that for the first time, your first year as a guitar player? If you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, that was my first time headlining arenas with anything. So that was, it's a intimidating gig at first, because there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of people telling you, try this, do this, play it this way, maybe try that. And so there's a lot of voices, and trying to, my nature is to want to make everybody happy, obviously, right? When you have a gig. So that was, it was really exciting and nerve-wracking all at once. I think my first year in particular, going into that. And then once you get one tour under your belt, you feel a little bit better about everything. Go, okay, I survived one. But, it's, now I've been there a while, and it's the nature of it has changed, just in terms of it feels a lot more like a family. Once you're there year after year, and you see the same faces, it does have a great feeling. Like I really enjoy touching base and feel like I have a friendship with management all the way down to the local string sections, or the people working at the venues. And so there is the nature of it changes. The first year, you're meeting all those people for the first time, so it's a different feeling for sure.
Yeah. Can I ask you, what was it like to work with Paul O'Neill?
Great. Paul, was really somebody who gave me a lot of confidence. So the way it worked out, I think, was I had very little notice in terms of what music to learn, and then to audition with Al Petrelli, who's the music director of the band. And that's typically your first audition is with Al, if you're a musician coming into the band, and then you get to go, back then, audition with Paul. And I think that they were taking video footage of me, and you guys were talking about the stage presence thing, but I kind of need an audience or be playing with a band to do that stuff. And so I was just kind of standing still playing some of the stuff, what I had learned. And also I just learned it the night before, so I wasn't like incredibly confident. So I think at first maybe the general consensus was that I played well enough, but I didn't really have any stage presence. And then I was lucky enough to have a performance on America's Got Talent with Rock of Ages kind of happen. And I remember sending the video of that, the link to the talent coordinator, kind of as a like, well, I guess I didn't get that gig, but I'm just going to send this to her anyway, just in case. And lo and behold, that got me my second audition with Paul, because then he saw me doing some of my rock stuff on TV and thought, all right, okay, this guy knows how to like rock out and, be on a stage. And so that got me that really had a lot to do with getting me in TSO, oddly enough. So and it was funny because I thought I hadn't gotten it. I mean, I had pretty much given up on it at that point. I just sent that as like I'll send it just in case. And then things
That's
ended up working
amazing.
out. Yeah, it's weird, right? And then now here I am like 12 years later, all the way from that moment of just sending an email going, I guess I'll just send it anyway.
Well, do you think that that's important now, especially for other musicians, to realize that the visual and that the energy transfers, so that even though you can play, let's say like Yngwie, but if you don't have, the panache and the presence, that it's not going to get you any further, like people going on auditions?
Well, I think everybody's got their own path and their own story to write, so it's, what worked for me doesn't necessarily work for everybody. And obviously there's so many different ways to approach all this stuff, like not just playing, but being on stage and what's cool and what's not. And so I think the one thing that kind of holds true is that the people that succeed work really hard and they spend a lot of time doing it. So even some of the 80s bands that maybe aren't like virtuosos on their instruments, but they set out to be rock stars, which wasn't necessarily my mindset. As I told you, I was more like, I just want to be able to play guitar for a living. But some of those guys maybe aren't the technicians on their instrument that some of these guys on YouTube are these days. But that doesn't mean they didn't work insanely hard at building the business of their band and pour a lot of passion and heart and soul into launching that. So I think in the end, it's like how much work you put into what it is you want to do, but everybody has their own story to write. And
That's really interesting what you said, though, because I as a guitarist, again, it's one of those things where you see these guys on YouTube, and I talk to guitarist after guitarist in all these incredible bands, because I know that no matter how well you play, someone's going to be like, but have you seen this guy's handle? And they bring up some mind-numbing technique, and somebody's playing something for 43 seconds who's probably never played in a garage, smoked a cigarette, done any drugs, drank any alcohol, but they sat in their room. What do you think about, the guys who spent all their lives, they didn't have YouTube and they grew up and they learned it, versus the dudes that sit in the rooms and they can play everything, they can do the Guthrie Govan, but they never smelled cigarettes in the casino next door?
I try to be the first person to tell people that they're amazing when they are, rather than like hate on it or be like, find negatives in it. I'd rather look at that and go, well, that's amazing. I know what you mean. There's a lot of extremely technically proficient guitar players out there. I think it's awesome. I mean, if it keeps it all alive, it keeps music alive, and it keeps people working on music. Maybe some of the scenarios aren't ideal, like people will talk about the singing shows like American Idol or The Voice and things like that, but at the end of the day, that's still inspiring kids out there. There's still kids that watch those shows, and it still inspires them to actually want to sing. And maybe it's not the same path of like growing up and going and playing club dates and playing in cover bands, but like I said, everybody's got their own path, and their own story to write. I think what's important is the hard work that people put in and the passion. And I in general, I just try to wish everybody well with that stuff. I'd rather not put out negative energy and go, oh, that guy's just it's like, no, that deserves to be recognized. That's hard work put in to develop that technique, and we just have different paths, I've been the guy who's been around and done all this weird stuff, and so, but I think it's all to be respected in the end. There's should never be disrespect. It's the wrong path to take mentally, I think, with other musicians. I try to be the first person when there's another great guitar player to compliment them rather than to get my fur up and feel competitive, No,
absolutely. Well, there's too much of that on the internet already.
And at the end of the day, I like to say that like life is not a talent contest. Does that I'd rather be friends with people, and if they're not, especially if they're awesome musicians, then like why wouldn't of course I'd like them to be like, hey, yeah, Joel, he's a nice guy, That's so yeah, I go for that rather than the, screw that guy, he's just this, it's like, it's negative energy. It's like, to me, it's like wasted energy. It doesn't really help anybody.
That's great. And speaking of helping people, you talked a little earlier about, your teaching, and you taught a lot of students at one point. And as someone who's taught in the past, like, kudos to you. That's a full-time job right there. But is that something that you still enjoy, in sharing, what you do with others?
It went away for a very long time. It went away during that whole, like I said, when I started to do Love Janice, I didn't teach at all. And that really lasted for 20 years. And then when COVID kicked in and I realized that it was going to be really a long haul, I decided to give it a whirl again and teach virtually, and took on 30 students a week. And, to me, that was something that really helped me through the last couple years. And I'm still even doing some of it right now. I don't know now that I'm ever going to necessarily entirely let it go, because I kind of view it as something constructive that I can do on the road that kind of keeps me, it takes my mind out of, it's almost therapeutic. When you're on a tour, sometimes the only thing you talk about and think about is the tour.
Yeah.
And so
sure,
it helps to kind of get with people for 45 minutes and talk about guitar, and it keeps me on my guitar, and maybe playing some other things other than just playing the set, right? I think it's kind of reborn with COVID into my life, and I think I'll probably, barring unforeseen circumstances, keep it around a bit. I'm still going to do it on days off on this tour. I don't see any reason that, especially still with COVID still being really a part of our lives, and being out there. I mean, I think I'm better off kind of hanging in and staying safe and like playing my guitar in my room, teaching some lessons, and that's better than going out to crowded places and hanging out and rolling the dice on getting sick and delaying, whatever, having a few shows get canceled.
Right. Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. How do you keep
great.
up your energy?
Because
you have a lot of it, it seems. I would think on a day off, you're exhausted, but you manage to find time to teach students and keep all of that going. So how do you keep that level of energy?
Honestly, it's not like I get on the road and it doesn't feel that hard for me. I have two small kids at home, so when it's at home can be difficult. Like, I'll feel like basically every moment of my day is spoken for. I'll be like, I get up and I start working, and I work all the way till maybe the last hour of the day, and I'll just, zone out on Netflix for an hour and then go to bed. So I get on the road and I actually feel like, hey, I've got a little window of time to chill and relax right now. So it almost gets a little easier when I get on tour. I hate to say that.
So what you're saying, Whitesnake is easier mentally than having two small children?
Well, getting on tour is less taxing. I mean, my other musician friends that are parents all kind of say that too. I'll say sometimes I debate, like, is it harder being on tour or is it harder being at home? And pretty much everybody says it's harder being at home. Like, you're putting in more work. So anyway, I guess it comes down to, for me, that motivation of breaking it down to every day, like trying to be productive. So I never, like, I can't even remember the last time I've had a day where I didn't do something productive for my music career and my job. It's every single day. I mean, I haven't had a day off that I didn't do something in months. So that just, I guess, is part of that. Like, just try to be consistent and be productive every day and work hard and do your best.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it helps to have a plan, to know where you want to go.
It really sounds to me, though, and I can relate to this, that for you, being productive, like whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's teaching a lesson, whether it's playing a show, whether it's starting a new endeavor, is like kind of what seems to feed your happiness. And you use a lot of, putting your energy out there. Like, I definitely am an energy guy in that, like, if you put out good energy, it'll come back. If you put out negative energy, it'll come back. How important is that as far as, like, in your everyday life? Do you just go, you know what, the universe is doing this for me today?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that, for sure. David is as well, Coverdale. He's a real positive energy guy. So I think, we relate very well in that regard. David's really great about keeping it positive, and I enjoy that, enjoy being around them because of that. And so, yeah, I think it's really important. I think having putting out the negativity, like you said, that does come back to you.
Joel, we know you're a busy guy. We appreciate you taking the time to hang with us. You're in rehearsals now, but like, is there anything you want to let people know about to keep an eye out for, or anything upcoming you want to tell our several dozen listeners and viewers about?
Well, obviously, sure. Taking off here on the Whitesnake farewell tour. So we're starting off in the UK with Foreigner and Europe, the band Europe. And then we're going to...
The final countdown!
Yeah, and then we're going to tour Europe with Europe. And there's some US dates coming, Everybody needs to realize we wouldn't do a farewell tour without playing in the US, but obviously I can't announce anything until the band does. But... we're gonna, I think, have this go all the way into 2023 and go to some other territories. We're not going to be able to squeeze it all in this year. And obviously at the end of the year, I'll have the Trans-Siberian Orchestra tour. And I have a new video that's out from a project called Iconic that is with Michael Sweet and from Stryper and Nathan James singing, and my bandmate Tommy Aldridge on drums and Marco Mendoza on bass. And you can check out the first single. There's a video called Nowhere to Run. The band is called Iconic. Frontiers kind of got us together, so people could go check that out. It's new and
cool. Killer lineup, dude.
Thanks, yeah, and that album comes out, let's see, I want to say it's June 27, but I don't want to get the date wrong. I'm not looking at I don't have it right in front of me. But I believe it's June 27th, so...
we'll double check that.
That album's coming. I have another project that I'm a part of that's not announced yet that I'm excited about, so staying busy, man.
Where can everyone follow you just to keep up with all of your projects?
I do all of it except TikTok because I'm not, I don't know how to dance.
I'm with you, man. I can't keep up with
that. But I'm on
either.
Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff. And, I like to keep it about the music business and what I'm doing and not all the social issues of our world and all that stuff.
Keep it positive.
No, you're a super positive guy. I love all the content.
That's for bigger minds than mine. Everybody seems to have the answer for the world's problems these days.
Oh yeah,
I do not.
More of that.
I have enough trouble showing up and knowing the songs at rehearsal. So
that's actually an important
it seems like
question.
You're killing it, so
because you're doing this final tour with Whitesnake, and obviously talk about one of the most pivotal bands in rock history. How do you go? Or I'm sure David's probably the one doing it, but how do you guys go about putting together a set list if this is going to be the final time? I mean, there's such a crazy career. Are we going to be in for a crazy treat? Are we hearing new stuff? Are we hearing old stuff that we haven't heard in years? What's coming out for this tour?
Well, I mean, I can't talk about the set list until we start gigging, but I mean, it usually it's David, no big surprise, that would say, I'm thinking this for a set, but he usually asks Reb and asks myself, what do you guys think? And during rehearsals, he asks everybody and says, what do you think? But so in general, I mean, obviously David is going to be the person who's kind of going, I'm thinking this would be a cool set and the right songs to play. And for the most part, we're always in agreement anyway. I mean, Whitesnake has such a great catalog, man. I really enjoy playing so much of the music. So I'm a little bit of an easygoing guy with all that stuff. It's hey, just give me the songs and I'm happy to play them. Just tell me what we're doing and I'm down. Sounds cool to me.
That's awesome. You're the ideal band partner. It's hard to find someone like that.
Just tell me what to play and I'll play it.
Pretty much, man.
Yeah, that's
all
great.
Right. Well, thank you again for taking the time to speak with us, Joel.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
It's great to hear, what was, your story and what you have going on. We can't wait to see, the stuff coming out. We'll definitely check out Iconic and everything, and we're going to let you get back to your very busy life. But check out 2020-d.com, like and subscribe, and we will see you guys next week.
And we were playing a lot of bars during the week. I was playing in bars and going to high school next. We opened for Metallica when I was in high school and went I went to high school the next day. The funniest thing about that is in this same house here, we were playing in a theater in Port Jervis opening for Metallica and Overkill, and the people from Megaforce contacted me because Metallica needed somewhere to stay, and my mother wouldn't let Metallica stay in the house.